Hello, everyone. Harold Simansky of mbaMission here, ready to talk to you about round 2 deadlines coming up. And obviously, they are in fact coming up. We're looking at deadlines right now for most schools in January. The bulk of them will be before January 10th. At that point, they sort of sprinkle along until really the end of January. I think Oxford might be the last one. There are always some laggards there, 1 or 2 schools that go into February. It's rare. So with this point, with only about a month to go, 5 weeks to go, if you're working on your round 2 applications, it is probably time to put into overdrive if you don't see the end in sight. So just to give you a better sense of how this presentation is going to go, I'm going to run through it. It's not particularly long. And the reason for that is I absolutely want to give people the opportunity to ask me some questions. I am going to just be looking at the questions at the end. So figure out in about 20 minutes, and then I will try to answer as many as I can. With that in mind, why don't we just jump right on in here. Round 2 deadlines are coming. Yes, they are. No question about it. Okay. So with that in mind, just moving here. So as I said before, what I'm going to be doing is go through some frequently asked questions and answering them. And then the last piece of it is I'm going to be telling you a little bit about mbaMission and then take some opportunity to speak to you guys. And again, as you have questions, please put them in the comments and then I will look at them probably towards the end. Okay, so let's begin with the frequently asked questions and our answers. I heard it was a tough year for applicants. Is that true? Yes, it is. The reality is that it's particularly tough for international students. And let me tell you why. The reason is international students, many of them simply couldn't get here last year, so they have deferred. So if in the past 20%, 30% of the class was international, those seats, many of them have already been filled by people who were accepted last year and have deferred. So at that point, there is a far smaller set of seats for international candidates. So again, that simply makes the acceptance rate much lower. And we are already beginning to see that. University of Chicago Booth has provided its admissions decisions to applicants for round 1 over the past hour, and we're already starting to see that. And a lot of wait lists. That's what it frequently comes down to in the world we live in now with regard to schools are waitlisting candidates to just see what plays out in terms of COVID, in terms of visas. It is expected visas will be easier this year, but again, you never know. So what I would say to everyone is that prepare yourself and you do the best you can, but also recognize that there are some things you can do right now that it will give you maybe a little bit better opportunity or at least some more realistic goals. So the first is, so assess your candidacy. That is always something that people really have to be pretty honest about. And I know at times that's hard to do. But the reality is it is something you have to do. And over what sort of dimensions are we talking about here? Obviously, one is the academic ability as reflected in your GPA. Candidly, there's generally not a lot to do with regard to your GPA. What you can do, we will talk about other things you could do. Academic ability in terms of your GMAT or GRE. I will then also talk about a new test, relatively new test called the executive assessment, which if you are having trouble with your GMAT or your GRE, you may want to pivot to that test. But with a limited amount of time, you have to be somewhat strategic about it. When we talk about the academic ability other, what that really is referring to is, have you taken other courses? Have you done other degrees? Have you shown your academic ability in some way or another? And frequently, we'll talk a little bit more about this, that would mean an online course of some type, but that not necessarily be the end of it. Professional impact and initiative, this really, think about it in terms of a resume. And on a resume, we always push people to talk about the impact they had rather than their responsibilities. So you can say you were head of finance, but maybe it's more important to say that you were able to increase revenue by 20%. You were able to cut costs by $100,000. Is that the way that you really have to approach your career? And spending a little bit of time and asking yourself, okay, what did I do here? what am I responsible for? What it actually was I able to achieve? That's what when we talk about professional impact and initiative, that's what we're talking about here. Achievement beyond the professional. And that's really what is happening outside of the office. And the achievement frequently, but not always, has to do with maybe a nonprofit you're involved with. And as with a professional experience, very important, you talk about impact. It's not just that you volunteered on Sundays at the soup kitchen, which is a great thing to do. I don't want to minimize it, but it's also you were able to increase the people served on Sundays at the soup kitchen by 30, by 40, whatever it is. And always think about achievements, always think about impact, certainly in terms of what's happening outside of the office. Achievements beyond the professional, these will also include things like you ran a marathon or you climbed a mountain. And when it comes to how business schools view something like that, it's terrific, everything's good, but it is less good than if you've been involved in some sort of service project, if you've helped your community in one way. Talking about the next things, ambitious or realistic goals. I joke with my clients, you can't do A, you can't do B, and then go to business school and become an astronaut. The reality is not just you have to be realistic with yourself in terms of the jobs you can get, but also business schools are going to be really pushing their candidates to make sure that when they go to business school can actually get a job afterwards. If you have never done anything in finance before, and if you go to business school and say you want to go into venture capital, even though you've never been entrepreneurial, then again, that may be not a realistic goal. If, however, you say, I've never been in startups before, I want to go to business school, and then I want to get a job in marketing at a startup company, that's very realistic. So it's always a question of looking at the employment report, seeing where people actually get jobs and saying, you want to go there as well. Fit with the target program. So what I tell folks, most people, where they go wrong in their application is not answering the question, why an MBA? It's why an MBA at a particular school. So clearly there's going to be different types of schools that honestly have different personalities to them. If you apply to Dartmouth Tuck up in Hanover, New Hampshire, and I live in Boston, believe me, even for Boston, it's cold. Hanover, New Hampshire is small. Hanover, New Hampshire is away from any big city. Hanover, New Hampshire is a very small community. So at that point, you have to say things along the lines of, I'm looking forward to bonding with my classmates. Our cohort will only be 200 people. I look forward to socializing with them. I look forward to being in the classroom with them. I look forward to making friends for the rest of your life. As opposed to fit with the target program, let's think about Columbia. Columbia is smack dab in the middle of New York City. What its calling card is, what it is really focused on, and where it feels like it is different is the engagement with the city of New York, internships, what I call master classes, which are consulting projects, bringing in ad hoc faculty, meaning practitioners who come to campus one day a week. So at that point, you have to talk about where you are in your career, and the internship is going to be really important for you. Being in New York City is going to be really important for you because that's the center of real estate. That's the center of investment banking. So frequently fit with target program really comes down to the research you've done. Have you spoken about people? Do you understand what is unique about that program? Do you understand really how you're going to plug in? And that, again, will take some time to do. And what I would say, if you haven't done any of that now, that's something that is actually quite time sensitive in the fact that you may ask to speak to somebody. They'll say, sure, speak to you after finals, which is December 15th. So I would say start the process of connecting with people right now. Application execution, it is what it sounds like. Make sure that your application is spotless. It's been proofread. Your recommenders have enough time to submit their recommendations. No stupid mistakes, like either including one school's name in another application or spelling Columbia Colombia, which is Columbia the country, and not Columbia the school, which is spelled with a U. So what I would say is look at all these seriously. Think about your ambitions very seriously here, and then say, okay, what is the overall strength of the candidacy? How confident am I? And based on that answer, it really comes down to the next piece of your strategy, which is, do I apply just round two to a limited set of schools? And then apply again, just probably less than 6 months later, in round one, where your chances are better, and maybe to a broader set of schools. And that allows you to really focus on your top tier schools, your real dream schools now. But that's only possible if you're willing to wait a year to apply that second time around. For other folks, it may mean something like, okay, I have to be in business school in September. I was planning on just applying to 3 schools. You know what? I better apply to 5 schools. I better have a better mix of what we call reach schools. Again, very hard to get into. Your stats may be not even up to the average, but dream schools you apply to. That's always the case. The next schools are reach schools. The next schools are target schools where your stats are where they should be. You have a sense of maybe other people you know who've gotten in there, and you say, okay, it is likely I will get in here, but still a chance of rejection. And at that point, beyond that, there are what we call the likely schools, which are traditionally they were called safety schools, where you know what, your stats are above average, you're really feeling good, you know the school pretty well, you expecting to get into that school. The reality is don't expect it. Business schools at every level are still very competitive. But the reality is if you want to be in business school next September, you need a mix of all those. You have to, reach schools are always easy to figure out. Target schools a little bit less easy. Likely schools are hard. And from that perspective, there's all sorts of different ways of thinking about it, but probably not enough time to talk about that right now. Okay, so the first thing, and as we look at the things you can most control, one of them is the GMAT or the GRE. Okay, should I take the GMAT or the GRE? What about the EA? So what I would say to people, first of all, you should have a good sense of your test scores and your ability to take a test. If you have been studying for a long time on the GMAT and you feel like the last time you took it, you just left points on the board, you didn't have a good day, then by all means take it again. Sign up, take it again. You don't even have to study much. Same thing with the GRE. You go in there, you've studied a lot. At that point, you just need a lucky day, and they happen. And what about the executive assessment? The executive assessment is a relatively new test, or it's a test that's new for full-time MBA programs to recognize it. Right now, it has traditionally been for executive MBA programs. A small handful of schools are accepting the EA in place of the GMAT or the GRE. They include Columbia, Duke, Virginia, I think, a couple more out there. The issue with the EA, again, the good thing is it's easier than the GMAT. Another good thing is business schools look at it, give it less weight, and are willing to look past a lower scored EA. They don't ignore it, but again, they don't give it as much focus. The bad thing about it, it is only accepted at a few handful of schools. So frequently people will take the GMAT, see how they did, and also take the EA, because if you study for the GMAT, you don't have to study for the EA. Then now also brings the question of, should you switch tests? And my answer to that is maybe. If you have done consistently poorly on the GMAT or the GRE, and despite studying, you haven't been able to break through, go ahead and take a practice test. You've taken the GMAT, go take a practice GRE. Taking the GRE, go ahead and take a practice GMAT. Obviously, you don't have a lot of time, but frequently you can get a sense pretty quickly which of those is going to serve you better. Which of those will you do better in? And then if your GMAT is below average for every school you're thinking about, yes, think seriously about switching over to the GRE. So let's look at what the different averages look like here. What is a competitive GMAT score? So you see them there. The top schools are all bouncing around 720 to 730. What I would say is there are some caveats here. First of all, women, you score about 10 points less. So the average at Stanford for women is probably close to 720. Males, international males in particular, males score about 10 points higher. So the average at Stanford is about 740 for a male. International males, the average is 20 points higher. So if you're a male engineer in particular coming from a foreign country, India, China, the average for you at Stanford is 750. So does that mean you don't apply to Stanford? Absolutely not. You apply, but also very realistically. I also like to point people at the, what's next there is the 80%, generally it's the 80% range. And a place like Stanford, people top out at 790. The low of people who get accepted, or at least that 80% mark, is 600. I think you have to be realistic about those numbers, though. Don't let them fool you. You can imagine the person who gets into Stanford who with only a 600. that person must be a Olympic athlete / astronaut. So again, be very realistic of what your chances are, and for better or worse, you have reached schools. You recognize it's tough, but all the top schools it's tough. Harvard accepts about 10-12%. So at the end of the day, if it's a dream school, you apply. Similar with regard to the GRE. You can see the numbers there. They're roughly the same in terms of the GMAT equivalent. Some more, some less. I mean, clearly Stanford's the same. Once you start getting to Harvard, it's clearly the GRE is clearly they'll accept a lower GRE when compared to a GMAT. And it's always one of those things. Which should you take? The best way, people say the GRE is easier. I'm not so convinced. The GRE is less quantitative. The GMAT is a little bit more quantitative. The reality is go take a practice test. They're free. They're online. Go take one, see how they feel to you. And again, the executive assessment is counted even. I don't have a slide about it. In fact, or do I? No, I don't have a slide about the EA. So let me just speak to it for a minute. The EA is the test. Again, if you study for the GMAT, you don't have to study for the EA. You can just go take it. Overall, the average EA score at the top schools is probably in the 150 range. If you get over 150, you're good. If you get over 155, you're great. Caveat here is the EA is only accepted at a few schools. What can you do right now? One thing is you can be working on your application. So I think that's the important thing, is work on your application. And when I say work on your application, there's really a number of pieces to it. Obviously, there is the essays, which take up most of the time. There's also your resume, and we'll talk a little bit about what it means to craft a business school resume. There is the application itself, which you do online, name, date, uploading some things, very tedious. If you truly need a brain break, if you had enough of writing your essays, then by all means go online and start filling out those applications. What you'll see though is there frequently, actually with every application, there's some short answer questions that you want to take a little bit of time on as well. So it's not just, what I would say is be very careful. You do not want to spend your last hours before the deadline filling this out. Get it all done. You can get this done pretty quickly. A few questions with regard to the application. Uploading your transcript, uploading your GMAT or GRE score. They can be unofficial copies of your transcript. They can be unofficial test scores. Whatever you have, just upload that. If and when you get accepted, then they will ask for the official scores or the official transcripts. So don't stress out about that. So as we go through here, we started off with where should you invest your time? Assessing your candidacy, as we talked about. Planning each application. The reality is that many schools have overlapping questions. You probably know that. Long-term, short-term goals. It's basically at every school. So there's no perfect way to do it, but create for yourself a matrix of some time, comparing the different schools you're applying to versus their questions. Most likely career goals is going to be across the board. Start writing all of those. At that point, on the extreme end, there's going to be some really quirky stuff, and you may want to wait on that. So it's just being strategic. You're all smart. You know what that means. Customizing your essays for each school, that's what we talked about earlier, in the sense of you have to really know the schools. Keep on asking yourself as you write the essay, can I swap out the name of this school for the name of any other school? And with a sentence, paragraph still makes sense? If the answer is yes, you have really a lot more research to do in terms of customizing your essays. And it's the little stuff, meaning what they call the entrepreneurship center, but it's also the big stuff in terms of, okay, how do they approach something like sustainability? Yale has one approach, Emory has a completely different approach. Getting to know that. The best way of getting to know that is by all means, look at blogs, look at some of the resources that we have. Look at the school's website, but also speak to people. Speak to people to get the inside scoop. Also speak to people so to be able to drop their names into your application. Some schools actually explicitly ask for who you spoke with. Other schools, in your essay, you'd put it. Crafting a business school resume, again, we have some great resources on that. A business school resume is different from a professional resume in the following way. The business school resume is more focused on the bottom half of your resume. A professional resume is more focused on the top half of your resume. So what do I mean by that? With regard to a professional resume, you have to be pretty explicit about what you did at which company, for how long a period of time, and what impact you had. True to some degree with a business school resume, but really what sets a business school resume apart is everything that else that is happening beyond your job. By all means, you'll have that professional part it would be pretty close to your current resume. Just make sure you're making note of the impact. But you also have to spell out how you did in school, what you did in terms of community service, both in school and currently. Maybe you add some interesting interests. Not that you ran a marathon, not that you're a foodie, not that you like to, whatever, watch The Office. Who doesn't like The Office? Who doesn't like pasta? But instead, talk about how you climbed a mountain in Costa Rica and you got stuck. I once had a client who put on the bottom of his resume that he was once bitten by a poisonous spider and had to go to the hospital. And again, the first thing his interviewer asked him about was that. So make yourself interesting. Always think about the things that you can say that are unique to you. And that's where we sit right here in terms of determining and expressing the fit with school. Talked about it a lot at this point, but get to know the school. Okay. Where can you save some time? Honestly, 5 weeks to go, a month to go, you have to start really triaging what you do and what you don't do. Alternative transcript, is it really necessary? The idea here is pulling together all that you've done, create your own transcript based on the different places you've been, and don't bother. I think that's it. Self-paced versus scheduled classes. If you right now have some potholes in your resume, with this idea here, maybe academically you did poorly, or maybe you just did poorly on quantitative school classes, or maybe you don't have any quantitative skills. There are ways of addressing that through online classes. One is MBA Math. There's certainly some courses on Coursera. There's the Haas Math for Managers course, which is very good. In the extreme, there's HBS Core, which is the ultimate gold star as far as how you can prepare for business school. And the reality is you don't have time for most of those. If you had 6 months, I'd encourage you to take the HBS Core if you have some academic potholes. Right now, if you have if you've shown poor quantitative skills, if you don't have any quant anywhere in your professional life or in your academic life, you may want to hurry up and take the course mbaMath.com. It takes about 20 hours. It's a self-pacing course, meaning you can take it at your leisure and you can get an A in it. So if you have time, by all means, take a course like MBA Math. It is likely you do not, in which case, when it comes to quantitative abilities, you'll have to have a recommender talk about how, from a quant perspective, just how great you are. You can put in an optional essay. Your job is actually very quant heavy. Let me explain why. Is it worth doing school visits now? That world no longer exists, so don't worry about it. New community service and work projects. It is very transparent if you just start a community service project now. And there's an exception to that. So I wouldn't even bother thinking about it. Speaking to multiple students and alumni, listen, it's an important thing to do, but once you get to 2 or 3 per school, that's probably all that you need in a lot of ways, or that's 80% of what you need. Okay, so here's some practical tips. This is in some ways almost silly. You know all these things. Take a vacation from work. By all means, it's not necessarily a great way of writing an essay, but if that's what you got to do, that's what you have to do. Do you prioritize all other activities? Yes. Write in the morning, revise in the evening. This is how I do it. Much more creative in the morning, a little bit of not quite as clear by the evening. So then I revise. Do not leave everything for the weekend. True. When you're writing an essay, any written work, it's best done in small chunks. This idea here, let me spend 15, 30 minutes on writing up an essay, or for that matter, really doing much of this work, and then put it aside. You'll get better results. It'll be less stressful. I tell people, if you quote have writer's block, look at the calendar for 15 minutes, just start throwing it on the page and see what you end up with. Alternate types of work match with your fatigue level. Yes. If the applications, filling out the actual application is the most brain dead, the essay is most creative. Again, nothing surprising there. More practical tips. Start with school recommendation with the highest number of questions. I guess so. I like to start with the school that has the most material, that you'd create the most material that can be used other places. A couple of schools that I actually like is University of Washington Foster. A lot of long essays, but once you get that done, you'll actually have a lot of material for other schools. I like Columbia. That first essay, short-term, long-term goals. Again, something that you can really use other places. Other things a little bit quirkier. NYU, they have that Pick 6, which is you take pictures of yourself and explain to yourself. You're only going to use it for NYU. So also NYU has a later deadline. Forget about that one now. Sequence your essays. Yes. Look at the different schools, figure out which comes first, which comes last. Here is a sample schedule for folks. It's a sample. Do with it as you will. Important things right at the beginning is make sure you've reached out to your recommenders. You can't only give them 2 weeks to write a recommendation. Define target schools. We talked about that. Take the GMAT at least 16 days before the application date. Have I had clients who took it the day before? Yes. Some schools say, well, we'll only accept tests that are at least 3 or 4 or 5 days before the deadline. Do what you have to do. Start really right away. Start reaching out to students because, again, they're in finals now, or they're about to be. It's going to be a little while till they get back to you. The question is, how do you find these students? LinkedIn, personal relationships always. People have worked at you, even though you may not know them. People have worked at your company. Email the presidents of the different clubs you'd be interested in. See if they'll speak to you. Frequently, admissions committees, the admissions offices may be able to put you in touch with somebody. So week 2, again, speak to the alumni to the degree you can. Think about if you want to start MBA math. Think about where your workload's going to be. Think about if you need it, but now's the time to start. Brainstorm and select essay topics. Yes, you're starting the process of writing an essay. Draft the career essay for school 1. I say always start off with drafting the career essay. Short-term, long-term goals, ultimate aspiration. Start in bullet points. At that point, see where it takes you. And then what you're going to do is look at each school and see how they're going to help you achieve these goals. Okay, week 3, revise and polish career essays. Yes. Draft all school 1 essays. Yes. Prepare material for recommenders. I would actually hurry that up. I do that as fast as you can. Revise your resume. Resume, it's a living document. You should always be revising it, looking at it, checking it. And that can really take you into maybe a week before the deadline. Get that resume right. Always make sure someone proofreads it other than you. Typos they're not fatal. I think somewhere we have a blog on that. Titles are not fatal. Typos are not fatal, but the reality is you don't want them. Polish all schools for essay 1, draft all schools for, again, at this point, you just keep on doing the same. Just go out there and start tackling these things. Week 5, bug your recommenders. Yes. I've never had a client whose recommender did not submit on time. Never. And I've worked with a couple hundred, even more than that clients. Most recommenders recognize the importance of this, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't. What I would say, instead of even bugging them, just take note of where they are. And you can tell that on the application itself. On the application, you're going to put in the recommenders' email address. They will be emailed a link so they can complete the recommendation. You can then go on and see if they've completed it or not. So just take note of that. If you have to bug them, then bug them by all means. But again, it's been rare from what I've seen that recommenders forget about you. Okay, polish application. Again, what they say here is set aside. Best way of writing essays is write, put aside, write, put aside, write in small chunks. Hopefully you have time to do that. Harangue recommenders. Take the GMAT again if needed, possibly, or the GRE again if needed, or look at the executive assessment. Okay, frequently asked question, do I need an admissions consultant? Obviously, I am biased, believing that you probably do. It's a big expense. It's going to be hundreds of thousands of dollars. You obviously want to spend that money on the place you want to be. So what's the best way of making sure your essays or applications are as good as they can be? Because today we live in a world where you need a very good application to get in, an admissions consultant. I think that's the case. I'm always excited about when my clients start getting accepted. Booth is releasing its decisions right now, and I'm thrilled as I've seen these emails coming in. So let me turn this question around. When do I not need an admissions consultant? And what I would say is you don't really need an admissions consultant if you feel like you know exactly what you're going to write in the essays. If you feel like you are a good writer, then I think admissions consultants are less important. What I would say, though, is someone who has gotten into the program that you want to go to does not necessarily make for a great admissions consultant. Just because they got in, if your profile is different, different rules apply. So again, always whenever you have somebody who is at business school, read your essay. If it's not like their essay, they'll tell you it's not so good. So what I would say is be realistic. In the case of our firm, you can buy as little as 2 hours with us. And I forgot how much it is. It's, let's say $700, maybe $750 now. Is it worth it for someone with real training, real expertise to look at your application for a couple of hours? Probably. But again, we also recognize we're expensive. So if anything, go onto our website, look at some of our resources. We also have what we call essay analysis, looking at each school's essays. That is probably going to be pretty valuable for folks at this point. So on that note, let me tell you about what we do. Okay, so mbaMission, I used to work at a different admissions firm. I came to mbaMission because it's the best. It's the highest rated. We have great reviews. You can see my reviews online. All of us are there. The reality is that we're all very good writers. We have extensive experience with every school. You've gotten to know me through this event, but most of my colleagues have also done events like this, videos you may want to watch. So go online, get to know us a little bit, and obviously decide for yourself. I tell people, I encourage people to go check out other firms. This big decision. So go check them out and then come back to us. The reality is we offer right now a free 30-minute consult. At that point, it's not a sales call. I'm not a salesperson. My colleagues are not salespeople. But give us 30 minutes and you can ask us whatever you want. You want us to talk through your strategy. You want us to talk through school selection. You want us to weigh in on whether or not you should take the GMAT again. 30 minutes, free. Sign up for it. It's on our website. Okay. This is what I was just talking about. Many opportunities to try us. Again, the most important here is on the bottom, free 30-minute consults. Again, very low key, just to ask us the questions you want. All the other material is on our website. I strongly encourage you to download the Complete Start to Finish MBA Admissions Guide. Free, many hundreds of pages. It will answer a ton of your questions. What I also like about it is Chapter 6 that gives you some guidance on resumes in particular that I think is really valuable. So as far as how we approach things, the first thing is our Complete Start to Finish package, which basically holds your hand throughout the entire process, helps you craft the story, relies on a lot of introspection on your part, helps you create a story that answers the questions, why an MBA, why now, and maybe most important, why at a particular school. We also help you think deeply about what a career may make sense for you. And from that perspective, we also help you with the tiny stuff, which pull-down menu, which choice should you make on a pull-down menu. So again, that takes longer. If you sign up for a start to finish package now, you could do it, but you have to get going. Many of you, though, will choose our hourly services. At this point, as you think about round 2, hopefully you've done something already. And unless you're really pretty lost, you should probably have someone like me, someone like my colleagues, maybe weigh in. Like I said, buy 2 hours. Let us help you with something specific. Let us help you in the general. You get a discount for 5 hours, but obviously, we have some services that may be interested to you. And again, it all starts with that 30-minute free consult. Mock interview sessions, you end up getting an interview. Obviously, we can help you prepare for that. And that's something we do regularly. We do all the time, and we do with good results. If you're applying to Wharton, if you get an interview at Wharton, they use something called a team-based discussion, which basically is virtually they put 6 of you in a room together, and you're supposed to be a learning team, see how each one supports the other in terms of if you were really together at Wharton. It is a unique type of interview. No one else does it. We do some mock interview around that, an actual simulation. It is very valuable. Hopefully you get an interview at Wharton, and then by all means think about it. Pre-application strategy. If you are maybe a year or more out, we can probably start working with you to help you think about your profile. What can you do now to really improve your chances? Our admissions team, you can go online. We're all very good. We all come from different backgrounds. We're all good writers. Again, here's just a sampling here, starting with Jeremy, our founder. But the only thing I will say is come and meet us. I think that's it. Finally, Q&A. Okay, I'm going to go to that now. There's our website. Sign up for a free consultation. We have a huge amount of material on our website, so by all means, take a look. Okay, I am from Boston, which means I speak very quickly and very long. So with that in mind, I'm going to take a step backwards here and then go through some of your comments. Okay, first question is, to be on a safe side, how many B schools should we apply to? The answer is some mix of some target schools, some likely schools, and some reach schools. And when I say some mix, part of it is just how quickly do you have to go to business school? And are you somewhat constrained in terms of, okay, there's a very small set of business schools that you apply to that'll be valuable for you. At which business school would you actually go to? Which would you leave your job? In that case, maybe it's just Harvard and Stanford too. If, however, you're like most people, you need to be in business school next year or in the fall, then what I would say is apply to probably at least two from each of these categories. 2 reach, 2 target, 2 likelies. If you say to me, okay, I want to be out of my house, then maybe it's 2 reach, 2 target, and 4 likelies. But generally speaking, we have clients who big, broad range here recognize 3 to 7 schools. I've had a client last year who applied to 17 schools. He ended up at Duke, rejected everywhere else. He had sort of a middling profile, I'd say, but it paid off for him. Obviously, the flip side is I've had clients who just applied to Harvard and Stanford, did not get in either place, but they were comfortable with that. Okay, what kind of questions are the most important to ask the alumni? Great question. What makes that school unique? What was your best experience at that school? What was the lasting value of that school? You really want to get behind the website. What can that alumni tell you that no one else can, that you won't find on the website? Okay, walking through here. If any questions, put in the chat. To be on the safer side, how many business schools? Okay, let me just go through here. Okay, how would you help a candidate who asks for a GMAT waiver? Well, I guess it depends on whether or not you got a GMAT waiver. And GMAT waivers, the issue with waivers is they can be really cuts both ways. Meaning that if you ask for a GMAT waiver, and if you have no quant on your resume, if it is clear that you are not a very quant savvy person, then a GMAT waiver doesn't help you, it hurts you. Because the reality is you have to have quant skills. How do you prove you have quant skills? If you're an accountant, then you're an accountant. So you can ask for a GMAT waiver, and business schools know you have quant skills. If, however, you've been a newspaper reporter and you have no quant skills, you ask for a GMAT waiver, maybe they give it to you, which in itself is unlikely. At that point, then they'll look at your application. They'll say, listen, we don't know anything about your quant skills. We look at your resume, there's nothing there. We look at your transcript, there's nothing there. So in that case, you would have been better off if you had taken the GMAT. And hopefully you do well. And if you do less well, then you've done less well. And maybe at that point, you take a class like a MBA math class. And again, if you have plenty of time, then you would take something like the HBS score. What about round 3? And the answer is round 3 is very tough. Round 3 is very, very tough. For an international candidate applying round 3, I'm going to guess here the acceptance rate is less than 5%. Frequently, round 3, you have to also have a pretty good reason why you're applying round 3. It can't just be, well, I'm just catching up to my life now. That just won't work. The reason to apply round 3, on the flip side is if you just started a job recently and you wanted another 2-3 months at the job before you ask a recommender, that's reasonable. If in some ways, listen, life situations change and you have to apply round 3, then by all means apply round 3. Recognize, though, that maybe a good strategy is you apply round 3, you really get a sense of what it takes to do an application, and then you immediately roll it into round 1. Round 3 deadlines are around March. Round one applications open around June, give or take. So at that point, then your chance of acceptance for round one, I know it doesn't do anybody any good now, your chance of acceptance for round one is a lot higher. So from that perspective, if you apply to round three, be very realistic about what your chances are. Okay, can you suggest ways to manage time, demanding job plus GMAT retake plus app for someone who hasn't yet reached out to a lot of alumni? Listen, at this point, you're just going to have to muscle through. Obviously, I don't know what your job looks like. Forget about reaching out to alumni or put it really on the back burner. At that point, obviously, I don't know what your GMAT score is. But if you really have to take it, great. If you don't have to take it, or if you don't believe you're going to do better, then just forget about it. Honestly, better to have a mediocre GMAT score in a great application than a great GMAT score in a mediocre application. I think that's it. Or honestly, maybe you should start thinking about round one next year. Obviously, I don't know what your own personal timing is, but think about what your candidacy will look like next year if you end up applying, if you give yourself more time. 700 GMAT, yeah, that's not bad, not terrible. Obviously, I don't know your profile. I don't know other things about you. But what I would say is give it a shot, but understand you may have to apply. But think to yourself, must you be in business school this coming September? In that case, apply to a lot of places. I know that doesn't necessarily help you. I know it's particularly hard to get out a lot of these, but many applications will be, you'll have a lot of similar essay questions. Or at this point, just apply to 2 or 3. And if you don't get in, then spend next year improving your GMAT, finding out about schools, speaking to alumni, maybe taking a course like HBS Core if you need to improve your quant skills. Define a safe school. I have 322 in GRE with a 169Q and 153V. Say I applied to Rice with an average GRE of 317. Is it safe? Over 4 years experience, 1 year gap, 2 months in international experience, multiple awards, probably not safe. It seems like a regional target, but probably not safe. I don't love the 153 verbal, honestly, particularly if you're an international student. So over 4 years of experience, I mean, that's fine. Frequently, they want to see 5, 6, or 7 even. Average age at business school right now is 28 for a woman, 29 for men. So again, safe, not so much. But is it worth applying to? Sure, absolutely. But if you must be in business school next year, then I would I'd probably broaden that list. Does a high GMAT score guarantee a great business school? Absolutely not. I had a guy who come to me 790, who before he came to me, he got rejected from every top school. A great application would help. We no longer live in a world where high GMAT score will help. And also, I see your name, but let me give you an example. This may not be you. What does it mean to have a high GMAT score? Male Indian engineer, the average is 750. So what does high mean? 760, 770? I generally tell folks, business schools start putting you in a different pile when your GMAT score is over 770. Beyond that, you're just like anyone else. Is a 13-year work experience too high for a full-time MBA and hence no school would offer admit? No. What I say, things generally change around 35, but 13 years is not bad if you have a reason why you've spent 13 years in a job. And that reason might simply be, listen, you were having great learning experiences. Things were going very well. And at that point, you weren't sure you needed an MBA. Now you've reached a point where you know you need an MBA. 13 years work experience, if you've done 5 jobs over the course of 13 years and go to business school to figure things out, that does not bode well. Perfect then. Great. I don't see any other questions. So what I'm going to just encourage everyone to do, so last call for questions. I don't see, looks like what's an average GMAT for a female Indian in an IT field? Probably about 730. Probably about that. So, and again, I don't want to scare anybody in terms of how your GMAT score compares. What I would say to you is keep that in mind as you assess your chances, and also recognize you still have to write a great application. If you're still writing a 730 GMAT around average for a woman, maybe it's 735 for a woman Indian engineer. But that means you got to write a really good application. You have a GMAT score that doesn't keep you in but doesn't get you out. Currently, I have a 700 GMAT, but I will take it again in 2 weeks. How can I determine which school I can apply since I don't know whether I can do better next time? Go in figuring you get the 700. I think that's it. Listen, the difference between a 700 and 720 is not that much. It doesn't really change the answer, meaning that you won't necessarily change. Reach, target, and likely schools are probably going to look pretty much the same. So keep that in mind. Listen, I hope you're doing well. I hope you end up with a 750. But still, I don't think the list is going to change that much. Should reasons like stuck without promotion for years, low salary, layoff possibility, and low career progression be the obvious answers to for applying to business school after 13 years of work now? I think you're going the wrong direction here. And what I mean by that is the reason not to apply for 13 years is you've been advancing, you've been doing great, you're learning new things, but now you want to be CEO and you need an MBA for that. If you've been spinning your wheels for 13 years and not really progressing, then that's a harder argument to make. For Yale male non-engineering, for a Yale male non-engineering Indian candidate, what's a good GMAT score? Non-engineering, probably 730, probably even a little bit higher. How will AdCom see a prospective student that wants to return to his country for management position as a reason for applying for an MBA? That seems completely reasonable reason. You just have to explain to them what skills you need and how you will develop them through an MBA. Again, an MBA can be seen as something of a bridge. So you've been doing one thing, you want to do something else. How will the MBA actually allow you to do that? I also see every school asking if you are a first-generation student. How does it impact your profile? Negatively, it's always a question, of course, who you are, but it is generally, if you are a first-generation college student, university student, then that will be a marginal benefit. It's not a huge benefit. It sort of implies the background that you have in terms of the support you may have gotten. Sort of a marginal benefit. I certainly would not change your application to highlight that, of course. Good. Okay, everyone, last call for questions. And I think that's it. So again, Harold Simansky at mbaMission. By all means, go on our website for some resources, as well as sign up if you want some free advice. Sign up for 30 minutes with us, for me, with many of my colleagues. And at that point, I think that will at least maybe answer some of your questions. One last question. Which schools can be targeted with a GMAT score of 720, 3 years of experience? Target schools in that without knowing your profile, the reality is that most schools for you, most of the top 10 schools, certainly top 10, even top 20 are going to be reaches for you. Obviously, I'd have to know a lot more about that. Someone asked me, how do I do that? I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. Maybe I answered your question earlier. Let me quickly see here. I do not see what you're referring to. So another 10 seconds to answer that question. But at this point, I'm just going to say goodbye to everyone. Again, go into our website, sign up for something with us, and have a very good month. Have a very productive month as you start getting your applications together. Okay, good luck, everybody.